What is crack-a-lackin', fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am Dan Favale coming at you with my certified fantabulous thermonuclear AF co-host, Mr. Grant Hughes. Don't worry, we have our full-on mega episodes where we go through the over-unders, biggest overachievers, underachievers, and how poorly Grant and I fared in that department, how our audience, Discord members fared as well. We also have the wrap up with the all league teams, all NBA, all rookie, all defense. But first, it's been a while since we talked about some news and current events topics. We've just talked a lot of big picture, every team stuff. So Grant and I figured that we would bounce around and talk about some of the bigger items that have caught our attention over the last week or so. But first, Grant, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm glad that we are going to hit some current events because sometimes it feels like we're ignoring like the actual things that are happening day to day. So this will be good to get.
Which is it's so big part of our day to day, but because you and I just get together and record once, twice a week if we're lucky, it's just like, I'd rather cover the big picture stuff with you.
Sure. Yeah. No, this will be good. So let's get into it. So the first I think kind of surprising story because it doesn't feel like tis not the season for extensions typically as we're getting close to the playoffs here. Jrue Holiday, 4 years with Boston for $134 million. One of the things this accomplishes, by the way, is you're knocking like $5 million off his salary next year in this renegotiate and extend, and that's going to save Boston, who will be a second apron team, like sevenfold. So a little savings there, even though that's a big deal for Holiday, don't you think?
Yeah, when you're looking at his age too, and it's funny that this is the third like 9-figure contract that he signed. I think Woj reported, and that's the first time it's ever happened. It was one of those things where I guess we kind of never talked about a number. I'm not surprised at the number, but I guess I am surprised in the sense that I thought if he was going to sign one, that it would just save the Celtics a little bit more on an average annual basis. So maybe I am shocked at that final number, but I will say he's been worth it. Like just looking at what he does defensively still, but even offensively, they've streamlined his role. Adam Taylor of Celtics blog, I believe he had a great thread where he's talking about, we all know what Jrue Holiday's been able to do as kind of getting to the corners, but just looking at the stuff he's been able to do as a screener, even some of the stuff he's been able to do as a short roll, it feels like this is the most playoff proof that he's ever been, because we know that his jumper has kind of fallen off during the postseason, specifically in his years with Milwaukee. But a large part of that was, okay, well, he needs to self-create a lot. And now he's not going to have to do that as much. Or if he does, there's just going to be more space with him to work off. So, maybe does the back end of this deal, he has that player option in 27-28 for, $37.4 million. Does that come back to bite you? You're all in on now. And I think what this does, so what was his player option? It was about 40 million, right?
I think so. Yeah. Because they're
now he's down to 30 million. And that's for next year is projected at 30.1 million. I think what that does is, and I really think it only becomes pertinent if they flame out in the playoffs, which I wouldn't expect them to, is just you're going to be a second apron team, but now it's just you have that 10 million extra dollars. Or does it make you more willing to stomach doing that? Does it make you more willing to extend Derek White now? And then, obviously, if his salary is not going to come up immediately, you always could have done that, but you can kind of look at it and say, okay, but we have to worry about Jason Tatum's next deal, and we have Jaylen Brown's kicking in. Do we necessarily want to extend him, even if he's willing to sign one? So I think even if the Celtics flame out in the playoffs, this makes it way more likely, feasible, manageable from the billionaire owner's perspective or ownership's perspective, that you can still float the crux of this core, which I think is just, look, I don't think fans should necessarily have to care about finances or root for teams to cut payroll. It is a reality of the situation, though. And this is going to make it, I would say, more tenable through at least next season. Now, when you're coming out of that and, Jason Tatum, he's going to be on a new deal after next year. Then we're going to have a larger discussion. But this feels like it kind of solidifies what the Celtics have through at least next season. And yes, it does. It does lock you into the second apron, which is going to limit you in free agency. You're not going to have any exceptions to use. It's going to limit what you can do in trades. It would have been more of a disaster to just lose Jrue Holiday in free agency to say, hey, look, we have the mini mid-level exception to use. That doesn't.
Yeah, right.
Compute.
I think the only thing I bump on a little bit is, yes, the cap's going up, and yes, 30 a year is not going to mean quite what it seems like it means now. Is like the theory is this is his optimal role because we're asking him to do less, except now we're also paying him like someone that you would typically demand more of. Like that's a little like incongruous to me. But at the same time, like I think it's just like you said, this is a win now team, and now you have Jrue Holiday for the next 2 years. He should be worth that money and then some. Like if you win a championship, he's worth whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's just the thinking is like, and I really like how hard is it going to be to move Jrue Holiday at if you really needed to down the line. I think he's even as because this will pay him for his age 34, 35, 36, 37 seasons. I think he's going to be like a positive value guy.
The first 2 seasons of this deal will absolutely be fine, and the number's not really that scary. But I mean, like so his final year is 37.4. Do you know what the salary cap is projected to be at that point?
I surely don't.
It's at 100 and I'll round up in 88 million. So You're going to say 37.4 against 188. That's like less than 20% of the salary cap.
That's fine.
I mean, for 37-year-old Jrue Holiday, that's not nothing, but
it's fine to have that on the back end because of the value that you're locking in for these first.
I think it's a win for him to get a player option.
Oh my God. Yeah. You're in your mid 30s and you're getting 9 figures. That's a win no matter what. But yeah, like that's player option notwithstanding, that's a great deal for him. Good for him, man. Like that, a guy that's just like beloved by everyone in the league and everyone that actually plays thinks this guy's phenomenal is getting paid again and again and again. So I think it's a great thing.
And they now have, when you kind of look at the deals they have, just very quickly. So yes, Jaylen Brown's very expensive. Jason Tatum's probably below market for now, but we know that's about to change. Like to get Kristaps at a lower number last summer, Derek White's another year cost controlled. Al Horford's another year very cost controlled. And to get a Jrue Holiday extension that, again, for at least the first half of it is just like, yeah, you do this, and to lower the number off of the what he could have gotten in that player option. This feels like a win-win for both sides. I will say the total value, and now that I'm kind of thinking about it, I'm not shocked at how much money they're saving. I didn't necessarily expect them to save more next year, but I might have predicted that the average annual value was like 30 million, not 30 plus million.
Yeah. I think, you might say, Dan, it's a little bit of a gamble. Speaking of which, Adam Silver had some comments on about one Jontay Porter, and they were pointed, I would say. What did he say? What are the buzzwords that have come out of Adam Silver talking about current? I don't know. Is he a current Raptor?
So the gist of it was Adam Silver made a point to say that he has incredible leeway or power when it comes to handing out punishments, which is like, I'll get to it in a second. Then he also kind of said that anything's on the table where this could lead to what he's accused of is a cardinal sin. This could lead to banishment was a word that was used. I have so many thoughts here, and it dovetails with the Jontay Porter stuff. I don't know if we talked about this in the podcast, but remember when JB Bickerstaff came out and said that him and his family were being threatened because a bet didn't pan out or something?
Yeah.
Let me multi-layer this and you can tackle it as you may. Where was this definitive energy from Adam Silver when Miles Bridges type stuff was going on? And I don't want to compare. It's not fair to compare these things, but the answer is that this impacts the NBA's bottom line, so to speak, if people think that the players are gambling or will impact the outcomes of the games. The other thing is, I have 3 other things, and 2 of them are very quick. So let me start with the 2 quick things. For him to kind of say, I have immense power, I'm paraphrasing, but for him to acknowledge that, we should be holding him accountable more than ever when the punishment doesn't seem like it fits what actually happened then. Because you're going to say that you have this capability and then you're still going to not step in certain instances or speak in as strong terms as you would now. So there's that. The other thing is, this could also be, so he's speaking in such definitive terms, but we don't have the results of this investigation yet. the two things that I would wonder there are, does he know more? Like, is the evidence just so against, like, is it just so undeniable against Jontay Porter? Or is he just trying to send a message that to the rest of the players that if you did something like this, whether or not Jontay Porter did, we're gonna, like, you're gonna be punished like to the fullest extent possible. Like, you might, to use the word banishment. So that stuck out to me, where it's okay, well, this is either there's more evidence, or then, like, we know, like, the evidence just must be so dire against him, or he's trying to send another message. My final thing, and this is the bigger issue, is I find it incredibly, there's a level of hypocrisy here, but there's this going on. There's the JB Bickerstaff type things where we know players are being harassed because they're already harassed, but now they're harassed about people's parlays not hitting. We have the NBA basically admitting, or the NBA saying that they're not going to admit to this, but they'll basically admit to it, that the game is being called differently than it was at the beginning of the season post All-Star break. That impacts betting outcomes. And if you had, I think it was Joe Mazzulla recently even said that he doesn't read too much into it, or it wasn't made too much of a big deal behind the scenes. So we're sitting here and we're going to get mad that Jontay Porter might have checked himself out of games or missed games to, like, skew the props in his favor. But the league impacted every single game that's being played without an official announcement to say so, that at minimum affects over-unders, but also definitely affects player props. I think it could just affect entire outcomes if you're talking about stars who, if the crux of their style, let's say, is getting to the foul line or doing this on offense. And to do that without officially announcing it, to where it shifts betting markets and the way that people might bet. And I don't have anything against people. I don't bet on sports. This podcast has made money off of people who bet on sports and sports betting ads. I've provided consulting services to websites that produce sports betting content. So there's a level of hypocrisy coming from me, but the league is just entering very uncomfortable waters. And I'm just like, this whole Jontay Porter press conference, was it brought to you by DraftKings and FanDuel? Like, who is the league sponsored by in that regard? I don't know how to feel like this. The feelings are very complex. I will just say that there needs to be, like, the need for transparency and is even greater than it's ever been. And I'm uncomfortable with the way the rules shifted in the game without there being any official announcement, because, do your sportsbook partners understand that this is happening when everyone else doesn't? Do they not understand? And my guess is no, they probably do understand. Do certain sports books have a leg up on others because they don't have the direct partnerships with the league? And then the ones who are getting screwed at the end of the day of this would be the consumers or the people betting on sports, because they're not privy to this change right away that's been happening. And yes, now we all are, but you have the NBA sitting there, and I'm basically, this is the podcast Zach Lowe did with, I think it was Joe Dumars and Monty McCutcheon was on it, where the gist of it basically was, well, we didn't make a mandate to do this, but we also kind of did. It's just like what I took away from it.
Yeah, I think
Ooh, you disagree with me. I'm ready for it.
No. I think what I'd say, what I would add, is that if you're looking for through lines, to not necessarily, certainly not eliminate some of the hypocritical things you've pointed out, but to sort of like make some of it make sense. I think you would say that Silver and the league are at least very much focused on the competitive integrity of the game, which you could apply to, obviously, like, this is why gambling, whether you think he's grandstanding or not, or whether you think this is a message that he's sending or not, like, gambling is a very specific kind, not gambling itself, but like players potentially, affecting the competitive integrity of the game to profit from gambling. That's a really specific threat. And it's why the league has been so sensitive about all that stuff, like, really forever, going back to like some of the officiating stuff in the early 2000s and the black mark that left. And like, so with that idea, the changing of the rules, and it was kind of handled messily. I think I totally agree with that. Like, just say what you're doing. Like, scoring's out of control. Offensive players are making non-basketball moves. to draw fouls. Like it's turning the sport into something kind of different. That's kind of a competitive integrity thing too. Like we want the game to be played a certain way with like a certain level of like honesty, I guess, like because the offensive player is sort of doing a dishonest thing to exploit the rules when the defensive player is out of position. I'm throwing myself into him. Nobody likes the look of that. It compromises some of the like, again, like the integrity of the game. So I think like that doesn't, that all of that happening at the same time does not seem particularly hypocritical, because I think Silver correctly is super concerned with like,
Okay.
we want fans to believe, to have faith in the game being played like the right way and like on the up and up, and like anything that cuts against that is a problem. So I think that that sort of connects the two things. But yeah, I can't disagree with like the idea that, you know, the league has not handled, I don't think, to me, what, and to everybody, I think what was like a pretty obvious change in how the game was played, and that absolutely affected, like, you know, like you said, the gambling markets and stuff. I don't have I think maybe you could even extend that same line of thinking to like how like the uglier domestic violence and like all this other shitty stuff that players do. It's like, that's bad. We don't want that. It's not making, it's making fans like not like that player maybe, or not like the team that employs that player, but it's not the same type of threat to like the like competitive, like, again, I can't think of a better term, the competitive integrity of the sport. Like a shitty player, a shitty person that does bad things, like can still like play the game on the up and up. And like that, I think is what maybe they care about more.
There's probably also a
That
different,
ignores like all the like, you want this type of person representing your league, like that's a separate issue maybe, but you know what I mean, like there is a little bit of a
and
through line you can trace.
I guess there's a difference in due process where it's when you're dealing with the
Yeah,
domestic violence stuff, or whether it's rape allegation or something, that investigations, there's an arm, a more prominent arm that's taking place outside of the league. So, and because that's in theory a more sensitive issue on a human level, way more sensitive. I want to make that clear than anything happening with gambling. That you're hesitant to comment on it, and now this is fully in the league's control. But to come out, there is a level of hypocrisy in the sense that to come out this strongly and say that stuff when you don't say that stuff in general terms. When it is
yeah,
domestic violence happening, you're very careful to tiptoe around it, or we're carrying out the course of our investigation.
sure.
He was just so, the quotes that were coming out, it was just so definitive, whether he was trying to send a message or commenting on the degree of evidence that they actually have. It just rubbed me the wrong way
Yeah.
relative to that, in addition to everything else with the gambling. But you do make the gambling specifically, not comparing it to domestic violence or anything else, the integrity of the game stuff. You want fans to believe that. The hypocrisy to me just comes in. Well, then why wasn't it communicated from the jump what you were
Yeah,
doing with the
right.
officiating?
Yeah, you would think, because what is such a high priority for the league and for Adam Silver is like, we need to preserve the notion among fans that like these games are being played legitimately, and like this is true that is what the value of like sports is, like true competition that's not tainted by like anything else, you know, whether it's rule manipulation or like something as as bad as like this game is fixed, or you know, things like that. Like nothing makes the money go away and the interest go away faster than the supposition that like it's rigged somehow. Like that's death to the money making, you know, apparatus that is the NBA. Whereas like some of that other stuff just isn't, and that's like a shit cold way to talk about it. But like that's, to me, that's the difference. I think it's a business, and like the biggest threat to the business is fans deciding like, oh, this isn't like real. This isn't what I thought it was, you know. Let's I don't know what to transition from there. But some more injury news. Unfortunately, the next thing we're going to hit here, Giannis Antetokounmpo against Boston pulled up non-contact injury. Everybody freaked out and thought Achilles. I know I did, at least initially. Looks like a calf injury, not as severe, but still not optimal here for the Bucks and for Giannis.
No, I mean, he has been their best defender this year, and which is not, I mean, you could say on any given year, although Brook Lopez was the runner-up last season. I think I saw, was it Jeff Stotts had said it, or someone else had noted that it only takes 1 to 2 weeks to recover if it is in fact just the calf strain. So that's fine on par. They're not going to be in the play-in, so they have the time to shut it down. This could impact their seeding, but they're just, if he's not 100% or any as close to 100% as you could possibly be this late in the season, they're absolutely fucked. I mean, you could point to some of the games where Dame has looked a little bit more normal without Giannis. You're not doing anything in the Eastern Conference playoffs without Giannis. And this just kind of underscores the fact that there's a level of anything can happen to the Eastern Conference playoff bracket. I know Boston is Boston, but even their crunch time offense has gotten boggy. And we've just seen it in all these other years where it's, oh, they fall behind 3-0, but then they come back to force a game 7, or it looks like they're on the brink against the Sixers last year. And oh no, they're going to win that anyway. The Eastern Conference is just a free-for-all with all these injuries. Feel like they're going to play a huge factor as to what does Joel Embiid look like in the playoffs, and even D'Anthony Melton with him. Now it's Giannis from Milwaukee. We know the Knicks are without Randall. What does OG look like for them? Cleveland with Mitchell, fresh off his PRP injection, the nasal fracture. How does that play out? There, and aside from injuries, just the East feels like one big-ass wild card. I mean, Boston is the certainty. And I would say that given the Giannis injury, and I know Joel Embiid has looked fine since he's come back, but it just feels like it's all set up to. Would you be shocked if it's, oh, Boston went 12-1 to come out of the Eastern Conference?
I was just gonna say the main takeaway here is like the rich get richer a little bit in terms, like Boston's gonna finish. They're up 13 games on Milwaukee right now for between the first and second seed. Like that number's probably getting, well, that number may stay there. That's a massive number, and now you're removing, or at least diminishing the best player on that second seed. The other thing that's interesting right now, if the playoffs started and we assume Philly wins the 7-8 matchup, it's Philly-Milwaukee. And like a second straight Milwaukee first round elimination is on the table if Giannis is not himself and Embiid is like closer to himself. Like, are we firing Doc Rivers now? Like, we're going to bring Budenholzer back? Like, that's just,
well, at that point, do you have to trade Dame for cap relief to afford to pay 8 coaches at once? How does that work?
Right. You got, well, you fire all the equipment managers who are apparently very unprofessional, I guess, according to Doc.
Okay, Patrick Beverly started the other night, so I think the Bucks are saved personally.
Yeah, no, it's, I mean, it's just the Celtics, I think we're going to steamroll anyway. And now it's just like, do they even need to show up?
And I would say it's objectively a bummer, because even if you're a fan of a certain team, you want to just, I would think anyway, that you would want to see the best players during the most important time of the year. And so look, it sounds like it's not as serious as it looked. But this is just like, I mean, it's a lower body injury to one of the most anomalous physical specimens we've ever seen. And that just makes me uneasy.
And like, I mean, Giannis, it gets glossed over now, but like people were saying Giannis was hurt last year, and that's part of the reason that the Bucks lost
the back. I mean, the back issue against Miami. You're right.
So it's really, I mean, we haven't really talked about this, but it's kind of concerning for he had a great statistical season, but like these things are piling up. Like it seems like every time we get to this point of the year, because he had that horrific, like theoretically looked like career-ending knee injury. Was it 2 postseasons ago when he got coming down off a dunk? It's just like you can't have too many more of these. Let's get to a couple of extensions. Non-Jrue Holiday edition. We have a head coach, Jason Kidd, and a top executive, Rafael Stone. A couple Texas teams, the Mavs and Rockets, respectively, looking to possibly extend a couple guys that have had a lot to do, I guess. Certainly Stone did. Kidd, the jury's out for me still on the success of both of these teams.
Yeah, I think Stone probably deserves an extension. You don't need to make him one of the, get the Tim Connolly special for a minute, who, by the way, Tim Connolly can opt out of his contract.
Yeah, he might be getting another one.
We'll get to them. But yeah, I think he deserves an extension just because, this overseeing the Steven Silas stuff was weird, but like what you did, this body of work in the offseason, I guess the one blotch would be, given how aggressively you chased Brook Lopez, I guess you still devalued Alperen Şengün, but just like, and I guess some of the stuff was non-decisions, like Jabari Smith Jr. fell to you, and look how good he's panned out. Mm-hmm. Some people might say, would you have taken Jalen Green all over again? Brooks, Fred VanVleet, getting Ime Udoka from a basketball perspective and the culture that's been able to be overseen there. The defense of just like how good it was this year. And what's the alternative at this point where it's like, no, you don't need to make him one of the highest paid execs, but I think he's absolutely earned the right to see this through for a few more years at a better rate than he's receiving now, because I would assume he's one of the lower paid executives in the league, just kind of understanding the dynamics with Tillman Fertitta. So I'd be for an extension with him. Do you have anything to add on that front before we
No,
go
I
to
was
Kid?
just gonna say, I think we both had him top 3 in our executive of the year, right? Like, might have been second. I can't remember, but like the Udoka hiring, like clearly changes the team.
And
They've
by the way,
drafted well, they've developed well, they've signed well. Like, there's not a lot else you can do as an executive. He did it
right.
all.
The Brooke Lopez Şengün thing is weird, but like they weren't moving Şengün at that time if they had him. And is there a chance if your two centers, if your three bigs were Brooke Lopez, Jabari Smith Jr., and Alperen Şengün, are you really like in that bad of a situation? It would have
No,
repressed Şengün's breakout, but like there are probably bigger mistakes you could have made. The Jason Kidd stuff is more complicated to me because I think it's the consensus is that he's not a good or great coach. Definitely not a great coach, not a good coach. But there's clearly he has it seems like a great relationship with Luka and Kyrie Irving, who are your two most important players who now play well, not just in general, but off each other.
yeah,
And Luka's even played faster this year. And then Kidd has, to his credit, like made lineup decisions post trade deadline. Now, were these Nico Harrison's decisions where it's no start Daniel Gafford, start Derek Jones? I don't know, but like he's pulled some of the right levers, and we've seen him explore a little bit with the different types of lineups they're going to use in the most important moments. I think I want to make clear where I would extend Rafael Stone right now. I'm waiting to see what happens in the playoffs with Jason Kidd.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I saw the stat and I was like, holy shit. He's won 50 plus games 2 out of the 3 years he's been there. They were a conference finalist 2 years ago, largely on a defense that he got a lot of credit for being the architect of. It's, the success rate is what it is. Like they have won a lot of games. Now, I don't know if you have Luka Doncic, I think the bar is always just like stupid high because he's that good. But I think maybe you could stop the. I would preface what I'm about to say by leading with, I also think Jason Kidd probably is not a good coach and definitely isn't a great one, like, or at least hasn't been. Guys can get better just like players do. But you could probably stop at he got Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic to like not just get along, but kind of thrive together. And like those guys cannot be easy to deal with, like individually, let alone like combined. So managing those two personalities and like that star wattage might just be like, yeah, he's the guy. Cause I don't know what other coach you're getting in there that's going to have success doing that.
And I will say, I think sometimes we underestimate because of how focused we are on the results that are happening on the court and stuff that's tangible and able to be measured. Yeah. There's something to having not just good, but incredible relationships with your best players.
Right.
And I would point to the biggest one that stands out to me is just Michael Malone and Nikola Jokic in Denver. Just knowing Michael Malone having traveled to Serbia basically every offseason with Nikola Jokic. And it's, do you get afforded the patience as an organization, or I mean, as Michael Malone, or even as an organization, do you have that same patience if there's not that connectivity between Jokic and Michael Malone? The answer is just no. It seems like he has good relationships with most of his players. Him and Michael Porter Jr. have always seemed a little iffy. They're fine. They seem like they're fine now. But so if you have anything resembling that dynamic between Luka and Kyrie and Jason Kidd, like that matters is my point. I'm not saying extend them, but I'm saying it does matter.
It's getting along with the star of Luka Doncic's like caliber is a threshold issue for a coach. Like it doesn't matter how good you are tactically or with rotations or motivation. If you don't have that, and we know that's true because I think if you pulled 100 people in the NBA and said, who's a better NBA coach, Rick Carlisle or Jason Kidd, they'd all say Rick Carlisle, or like a ridiculous majority would say Rick Carlisle. And Rick Carlisle's gone because it didn't seem like his relationship with Luka was very good. So like Jason Kidd has that. And so therefore, like he has met the threshold issue to coach this team for as long as Luka wants him to have that job, it seems like.
That's probably the best way to frame it.
Hey, thanks. Lastly here, or a couple, well, like a twofer, Minnesota Timberwolves edition. Karl-Anthony Towns coming back as soon as, I guess if you're listening to this today, if this comes out on Friday, from that knee injury. Be fascinating to see how he looks, what that integration process looks like, because Naz Reid has been mostly very good in his stead, and how are the Wolves going to rejigger that rotation? The offense still sucks, so Cat's going to help, but yeah, he should be back. Like any additional thoughts there, and if not, we can get to the juicier stuff with the ownership controversy.
Well, there's been this not rush, but there's some people who've mentioned that, well, do they need Karl-Anthony Towns because of how well Naz Reid has played? And I just feel like that's not even a question. The answer is just yes, because Karl-Anthony Towns is still the more dynamic offensive player. Defenses are still going to guard him differently than they do Naz Reid, especially when you're looking at from beyond the arc. And Naz Reid is an upgrade defensively, especially on the perimeter, but it's like you don't need defensive upgrades on this roster. You need the offensive upgrades. And so I've always viewed it as, if they're going to, if you want to get by in the regular season, I'm not saying Naz Reid is better. I love him. He was my 6th man of the year pick. But like, you can live without Karl-Anthony Towns. If you're going to win in the playoffs, you can't do it without Karl-Anthony Towns.
Right.
And what I also want to make clear is that if you end up, and this kind of might dovetail into what we're going to speak about next, if they do move Karl-Anthony Towns in the offseason, regardless of what happens in the playoffs, it's not because they think they're better or just as good with Naz Reid instead of Karl-Anthony Towns. It's because they've decided they don't want to pay Karl-Anthony Towns, and they think they can approximate enough of what he does on offense through Naz Reid or these more affordable contracts. And that's a different thing. It's not, they just don't think they need him. No, it's they think they can approximate enough of him on a cheaper rate.
It's not, I would go even farther. I think it's like, if they trade, it certainly won't be because they think they can approximate. It's if they trade him, it will be with the knowledge that, like, we're going to miss him, but financially we just can't do this. So we have to make this like calculated decision. You know what I mean?
Like, more immediately, it's good that he's getting to you, right? Some game, assuming he's actually ready, which I assume he would be, that this isn't just, there's urgency, but you're not just going to rush back when you're not ready. Mm-hmm. The fact that he'll get some run under him before they get into the playoffs is probably a good thing, right?
Oh, for sure. And like, there aren't a lot of, he's got a lot of questions to answer playoff performance wise, right? Like, cause he's had some real duds in like playing games and just high stakes moments. Like, so any ramp up is going to be helpful both for him and for the Wolves to sort of like, I don't know, their offense I don't know if their offense is good enough with him. I know it's not good enough without him. Like, so he's got to be close to full speed for them to have any chance to like really make a run here. Lastly though, we've got the Timberwolves ownership controversy, Alex Rodriguez and Marc Lore versus Glen Taylor. It's getting contentious. Some pretty like pointed leaks, it seems like, coming from Glen Taylor about A-Rod and Laurie's intentions to lower payroll. It's like kind of touching on the Cat stuff, but it's just a lot going on back and forth. What do you want to hit on with this story?
There are no protagonists in this situation is my point, because the fact that Lore and Rodriguez came out and were saying stuff right away, and they did that Dane Moore podcast, the Dane Moore NBA show that they did, it was an excellent interview by Dane Moore and Kyle Teige. But like, so them being so outright and throwing Glen Taylor under the bus, saying they didn't miss any deadlines, saying that they're responsible for all these good things that are happening. And then you have Glen Taylor at first saying they missed these deadlines, but now it's because they had projections of spending next year and that it was $1 million beneath the luxury tax. There are so many things here. One, please, whenever these news is coming out, we have to figure out, okay, well, who is this benefiting? And in Glen Taylor specifically, you're going to tell me that the franchise increasing in value since you sold it by a not insignificant amount isn't a primary motivating factor here. And two, I'll believe he's prepared to float this roster's payroll for longer than these other two when I see it. I'm not saying they would be. And my other question here would also be, well, how do these projections work? Is they submitted, and I want to know why they did this, one projection and said, this is what we're doing Or did they have a variety of projections that said, well, if we kept our payroll in the second apron or past 200 million, or if we went even lower than this, was this just one projection they're harping on? And I don't know who I'm conditioned to believe or root for. I will say, though, if they didn't actually miss any deadlines and they still wanted to cut the payroll, that would just be their prerogative. I wouldn't agree with it, but that's their prerogative. And you don't get to hide behind, I'm doing this for the fan base because we don't want, like, no, shut the fuck up, Glen Taylor. Like, you're doing this for you if this is why you're doing it. I'm not saying Marc Lore and Alex Rodriguez are the protagonists here. It's just this is being pulled in so many different directions. I am skeptical because we're already seeing like people, the parties in the situation sabotage or like invalidate what they've already said, because it was, Glen Taylor, as an example, the reasoning was, well, they missed these deadlines. But now it's actually, oh no, they wanted to be too cheap with the way the team was handled. So it's just, there's so many inconsistencies here already. And the fact that you had Marc Lore, I don't know if you heard any of the interview, but he's like really talking about I've never had more money or cash in the bank. It's like, bro, what are we doing here? And so I'm skeptical of everyone involved. I am curious who is going to have the legal standing.
Yeah.
If it had nothing to do with missed payments or deadlines or equity, like a lack of equity, I don't know like what leg Glen Taylor has to stand on right now would be my initial thought. But it sucks. My final thing, I'm sorry, before I throw it to you, it sucks that all of this stuff, the time when it's coming out, these are all like, they're making themselves the plot when it's Karl-Anthony Towns is coming back, or this comes out right before that Nuggets Timberwolves game that could have technically decided who is the number one seed in the Western Conference. And all this is happening after one of the best seasons in franchise history, with the best shot the Timberwolves have had at making playoff noise since Kevin Garnett was in a Minnesota jersey. And so it takes away from the fact, and it really sucks because there was already this sense, whether it was because of the national media or just the reality of the situation, that this team was kind of operating under a finite window or borrowed time. You and I have talked at length about how that was always kind of hyperbolized, because it's, if they're cutting costs before next year's trade deadline at the earliest, then they're just cheaping out. This team is good enough to at least see it through to then, if not the end of next season, stomach it for a year. But you already have that stuff in the backdrop, like, oh, this could be your best, last, only chance at winning a title with this core. And now, whether that's true or not, now we're throwing all this into the equation, and it's at the fore of everything that's happening. And you wonder how the players are going to get paid anyway. But if you're, and they have more information than we do, I'm sure. But if you're a Karl-Anthony Towns, as an example, and we're seeing this story about the luxury tax projection specifically, well, who the fuck was going to be moved to keep us under the second apron? It wasn't even the second apron; it was the luxury tax itself. Yeah, like, how does that make you feel?
Yeah, I think like my initial reaction when I saw, well, first of all, haven't we seen reports that Lore and Rodriguez have taken some measure of credit for like making the Tim Connolly hire happen, or like going,
they didn't take some measure. They took it in its entirety.
Okay. And the Gobert trade and all this other stuff, right? So then it's like, it doesn't seem like the actions of ownership that would be like, oh, we got to get back under the tax. Like the Gobert trade, they like engineered all of this. It seems like they, if it is true, they put the Timberwolves in a position where some owner might be like, we got to get back under the tax. This is going to cost too much. But like, that doesn't square to me, because like, so the same guys that like said, let's spend to make this team a winner, which it hasn't been, and now we're going to like pull it back. I don't know whether that's true or not.
It's well, like, can I interject for 1 second?
Go ahead.
Where were they saying all this last year that they were responsible for it? Because the reaction to them might have been a lot.
Acting and speaking out of total self-interest. So you like can't trust anybody in any of this. Your original point of like, there's no winner, there's no like good guy is very true. But like, so I was annoyed, I guess, or like, oh, when I saw the report of like, oh, they intend to cut down, they're going to blow the team up. I'm exaggerating, but like, they're going to take a step back to save money. It's like, damn it. Like it's hard to root for A-Rod in any circumstance. And so then it's also like these new guys are just going to come in and they're just going to try to turn a profit and sell this team in 5 years or whatever. I can't root for this. But then it's like, So I'm in Glen Taylor's corner, who's presided over like the least successful run of any NBA franchise since it's existed.
And like a dozen like failed sale attempts or like gotcha sale, whatever.
No, I can't. Don't make me choose who to side with here. I want to abstain. Like, I don't want to side with anyone here. But ultimately, yeah, like I think if you're a Timberwolves fan, you'll just take anybody but Glen Taylor at this point. Like, if you had the choice, because you know what you get with him, you've seen it for 30 years, whatever it is. So yeah, it's a mess. Like, last thing, it sucks, like you said, that it's happening now. It's like, can't we just have nice things? Can't we enjoy the Timberwolves like winning 50 whatever games and going into the playoffs with a high seed and just like maybe a shot to make a conference finals or whatever? Like, nope, we got this. This is we're Timberwolfing right now.
I just want to talk about how Naz Reid slides his feet on the perimeter on defense, and here we are talking about Glen Taylor, Marc Lore, and A-Rod. I will say, after all of this, though, A-Rod and Marc Lore saying we're responsible for paying Connolly, which, by the way, we show that for a second. If I'm him, I'm absolutely opting out and leveraging the threat of like, well, Detroit might fire Troy Weaver. I guess you have to look at, well, what other teams are going to want a lead executive. I'm opting out just with all the turmoil. It's getting more out of this.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But so you have A-Rod and Marc Lore saying, well, we were the ones that paid Connolly and spearheaded the Gobert trade. And now you have Glen Taylor saying that he's trying to protect the fan base from an ownership group that's going to cheap out. If either one of these two now, there are no out, you don't get to make any cost-cutting moves this summer by the trade deadline, because you're fucking, I mean, they might not care because they're still going to be cashing checks and like they have the equity in the franchise that they really care about public perception, but you're going to look like mega shitheads now if either one of you now, whoever keeps the franchise, goes to. So this is almost, that might be the bright side.
You're right.
The Timberwolves fans is that this core now has to stay together through at least, I would say, next season. Otherwise, all of these guys look like assholes.
Right. Yeah. They've maybe inadvertently given Timberwolves fans a gift because they won't sell cat off to get under the tax, because they can't now, because, well, who knows what they can and can't do, but like, it'll be a real bad look for whoever owns the team. It'll be a bad look if they do that.
Do you want to take us out here? This was good to get. That was like, I'm glad that was cathartic to talk with you about, but it kind of sucks that was something we talked about. If that
yeah. Well, look, NBA owners are you can't root. Maybe we should do a which owners should you root for power rankings? Are there any? I don't know.
No, the answer to that is no, even though some of them might seem funny. Shout out Steve Ballmer and toilets. Although,
I'm rooting for Steve Ballmer. That guy's passionate. I want that kind of passion in my team.
I'm just surprised that you didn't knock Shai Gilgeous-Alexander out of your All NBA consideration for driving an Elon Musk Cybertruck or whatever they're called.
I've seen a Cybertruck in the wild. It's very strange.
There's one around my neighborhood because now I've seen it multiple times, and it's a little jarring.
Yeah, it is.
My kids refer to it as the car to climb out of it and threaten me.
Yeah, it's like RoboCop's gonna hop out. My kids refer to it as the car from the future whenever they see it driving around. It's like, that's right. That looks like what that is.
Well, we'll see if it catches on, but
I don't think so. We'll see. Everybody, thanks for listening. Thanks for catching up on the news here with us. If you would like to, please do us a favor, rate, review, subscribe, tell your friends, spread the word about this podcast wherever you consume it. If you want to join our Discord, links for that in the YouTube and podcast description. Ditto for any merch you would like to purchase from HardwoodKnocks. And thanks again. Shouts out to Frank Ntilikina. Apologies, Jared Allen.